Civics, a program on Arlington Independent Media, where we meet people who get involved in their community in a variety of different ways. I'm Michael Shea, the host of this episode of Civics. We'd like to say that you're both going to be informed by this program, and we hope inspired by this program. So we're joined today by Allison Kole, who's a third-year law student at George Washington University, but she's been involved in a lot of other things too. She's been a volunteer counselor at the Health Insurance Project, and she has worked for Greenpeace, and she's worked with Amnesty International. So Allison, thanks very much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Allison, let's kind of go back to the beginning. Can you remember the first time you were involved in your community? And what were you doing?
I actually remember the first time I got involved in something, and it was actually in grade school.
Okay.
And I just remember a kid who was kind of always picked on, and whose parents, weren't really around to stand in for him. I started sort of advocating for him as a second grader, and I actually led a bunch of students to start chanting and protesting when he was taken to the principal's office for getting in a fight with a kid who had been bullying him for years. And I felt, and I knew at the time that the reason that my friend was getting punished and that the other kid wasn't is because the other kid's parents were really involved in complaining, and that my friend didn't have anybody to speak up for him. And I really, that was the most sort of activist-y thing I had done until I was well out of college. In college, I was sort of afraid to try these different groups.
So, let's go back to the second grader for a second.
Yeah.
So where was this?
This was in outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay. And so it's kind of what happened, I guess. I want to know.
I think he got in trouble, and I almost did too. I remember the teacher coming out and saying, "What is all this?" And she was like, "Why are you chanting this?" And we kind of dispersed.
All right. Now, the only question I have is, do you remember his name?
Yeah, his name's David.
Do you still know? Have you kept in touch?
We're not in touch, but I haven't kept in touch, I think, since college. But we weren't really friends since then. But we.
Still, you had that.
I felt
you
like
had a very
we had
unusual
a connection there.
Yeah. All right. So then you're off to college, and what were some of the things you got involved with in college?
I got involved with there's this group called the University Homeless Council, and I think I heard about it from word of mouth, where they would tutor kids in the shelter and just do events and actually meet with people one-on-one to try to make a plan for them to help them to get housing. Mm-hmm. And so I met some really good friends there, and people that kind of further inspired me to get involved. And then I started doing more political work. I volunteered for the Carey campaign, and after that I was sort of frustrated by the messaging and media around politics and the type of, I guess, their idea of what informing the public about the candidates was about. So I started this small group that was called the Student Watchdog Group, and we published a newsletter that was sort of in the style of The Daily Show, where it was telling students about legislation that would affect them, but in a way that was funny.
Mm-hmm. And where were you?
This was at University of Florida. And then after that, I worked in D.C. for an education conference, and I just loved the city and decided I wanted to work for an NGO after a brief stint I did in Spain.
So let's go back to your involvement in that Carey campaign, your disillusionment with media. Were you disillusioned with, you're listening to the media, were you disillusioned with how American politics messages for its candidates as well?
I don't think I was in tune with that at the time. I had actually my best friends in college were campaigning on the other side. They were involved with the college Republicans. Okay. So I think because of that, I didn't necessarily, I feel like I had a good understanding of the other side's point of view. Okay. But I felt like that, and then also the idea that the election was already predetermined, and that after the fact, political science professors pointed out that, of course, it couldn't have come out any other way. And that was kind of frustrating to me. And I still believe that, information and democracy does still work. Right.
Well, and my frustration with political messaging is that you have to be absolute about it. And so if you're, whichever side you're on, it seems to me, in a campaign, if there is something good about the other person, the other candidate, that should be said, you can't say it. You know, you can only focus on that negative. And I don't really blame candidates for that. I think that's a problem we have as a society. That's how we've responded to people, and so they're serving us up that way. And I think that's a disservice. I think campaigns should also be an opportunity to define differences, but to find where there's areas of common ground. Because I feel like you have an area of common ground, the campaign should sort of cement that, and it doesn't. It makes it disappear.
I think that's right. I think it's a competitive nature that we have, and it kind of really isn't a very long-term game, considering that you have to be working with members of the other party that you've labeled and possibly ostracized through your campaigning once it's all over.
Now, you have not, that wasn't just your only experience with the media, because you became an independent film producer. How did that come about? What was that project?
That was just coming about because I really liked coming to Arlington Independent Media and having a creative outlet. And
I have to say, I wasn't going for a plug there, but thanks for the plug.
I'm a pretty big, I plug AIM all the time. I try to get people from like all over DC to come out to Arlington to volunteer. But so I was actually working at Greenpeace at the time and doing a show that was also sort of a parody about the news too. So I guess there's this sort of
there is this trend
of me criticizing the media. But so
I wasn't aware of that.
I guess we sort of developed a mockumentary style with our work, and then I had been interested in working on documentaries with my partner before that, but this opportunity kind of fell into our lap because it involved a family member. And so through that, making this film called Married in Spandex, which is about gay marriage more or less, we were able to become advocates for a cause through the film, which wasn't necessarily the intention. We tried to make it fairly neutral, and it's a personal story, so the perspectives of the subjects are what leads. But
and it's not a mockumentary. It's actually just a documentary.
It's a documentary,
right.
But it is, yeah. But it also is fun and funny, and it was great because we were able to have the film be used for fundraising for Marylanders for Marriage Equality 2 falls ago, and they raised about $10,000 at one event. And even way out in Oregon, a Basic Rights Oregon, a group was able to raise money. And then we were able to meet all these other filmmakers who also had the advocate bone and wanted to merge their creative work with what they were doing.
And it got into some international film festivals.
Yeah, so we went to Ireland, so I guess Gold Spandex and Midwest Divas do translate into Ireland. I wasn't sure how that would go.
And Canada, but that at least makes more sense.
Yes,
that they would transfer to Canada.
And so that, we met all kinds of people who were using art to become involved too. So
you brought to that some background in media and some experience with it.
Yeah,
it wasn't a total learning process.
A little bit.
Yeah. So what you were then involved with Greenpeace. What are some of the campaigns you worked on with Greenpeace?
So I was sort of a generalist assistant, and then I was able to manage some projects. So I did gravitate towards the media project. So one of them, which is actually going to come out with another sort of campaign ad for Valentine's Day. One project I really liked working on was called Polluter Harmony. And it showed, basically it's a spoof off of matchmaking and eHarmony website, so as a way to link politicians and lobbyists who are actually working together, but in a way that's humorous and attention-grabbing. So that was a project. And then, I worked on traditional Greenpeace projects too. I worked on a whales campaign. I was able to work abroad, helping 2 activists who were facing some serious jail time.
That was in Japan.
Yeah, they're basically working with whistleblowers in the whale meat industry, and the government didn't like that. So they were facing about 10 years in jail, but only because of an international campaign. Thankfully, they didn't have that.
Did you find in Japan other groups that also support whistleblowers? Was there enough of I don't want to say a culture of it, but did you find support, or was it really they really were isolated?
It seems fairly bleak there. There is a couple of famous cases that there's some articles I think in English about it, but basically people firing against the Iraq War in prison for long periods of time. There are journalist groups too and some lawyers groups that were talking about the need for more free speech in civil society. Right. And so those groups did come together, and actually Amnesty International came in support of the Greenpeace activists, which I don't think has happened very often because of their sort of arbitrary detention by the government. And actually some experts who are experts on freedom of speech from the European perspective, from the European doctrine on human rights came out, and those sort of those sort of cultures all merged together. It's really interesting. And
there's a lot of that going on in Asia right now. The countries are grappling with human rights and democracy and individual rights and things.
I think it was surprising. I remember, Toru was one of the activists, and he was really upset, actually. He didn't, I think that there's a, kind of like in our society, we have an expectation of certain freedoms. And whenever they're arbitrarily denied to you, it can be kind of shocking. And I think he's actually trying not to live in that country anymore. But he thought he was doing the right thing, and he was very, affected by being punished for it.
So you then decided, just to take a shift here, to go to law school. What motivated you to go to law school?
Well, I think working on the case is called Tokyo 2. There's not a lot of media here, but in the UK there's a lot of media about it. So the Tokyo 2 case and working on civil liberties issues, it felt really natural. I sort of gravitated towards those projects too. I was part of a lobbying group after Obama was elected to try to create some space on the left for climate change policy. And so there's a lot of legal ends to the projects I was doing.
And it all kind of traces back to that second grade, being the advocate.
I think, it's being an advocate. It's a difficult balance, and you're talking about the health insurance counseling project of, being an advocate but not, overstepping your bounds. And I think that what I did as a second grader came from a good place, but there's I'm learning a lot about what that actually means to be an advocate and the nuances of representing people and what they want instead of what you necessarily think is right, the right action at the time.
So how has it been? You're at George Washington University Law School. Is it what you expected? Any regrets on doing? Because it is a huge commitment people make.
I think it's really overwhelming at this point when you're looking especially for public interest jobs, and what happens with a lot of public interest job is they're actually funded in part by these sort of accounts in escrow from law firms. So the small amount of interest that goes to these firms actually gets put into a pot for some legal services foundations. They're not all like that, but so, with the legal field and a downswing, and that would probably actually, I think, stay that way. It's a little bit, it actually does affect services. And then, of course, opportunities in the government too. So that's a little daunting, and I think every student is really, focused on the short-term thing, but I think long-term it'll be a great marriage of all my interests.
But are there anything like, I don't know, Kickstarter campaigns, things like that? Is there anything that can take up the slack in what they're getting for the public interest?
Yeah, I think there's
any signs that people are doing that?
Yeah, a lot of people are thinking about it. There's a lot of loan incentives to do that. As far as services, I kind of, when I was in high school, there was this beginning of the shift of compulsory volunteer time. You have a son, he's in high school, right?
Yes.
So this had just started happening.
Yes.
And I think in the legal field, there's in the ethics rules, they recommend that you spend 50 hours, a year giving your services. So there is, I was surprised that there is, an imperative to work for give pro bono services. And then, there's a little bit of a demand, and schools are recognizing students for pro bono services for hours that they give. And then even in New York now, it's a requirement to pass the bar. You've had to accumulate 50 hours of pro bono to even pass the bar. So I think that there's, the idea of giving back. I think the tenets that you learn in law school, regardless of what you do after, really stick with people. So even if it's a fight for money for organizations that give legal services, I think that a lot of people are giving a lot of time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's funny thing about the compulsory. Back in many years ago when I was a high school student, we did have a requirement in our government class to spend, it was something like 5 hours. It was very minimal. Work on a political campaign, anyone we wanted. And it was probably a really good idea, and then you write a paper about what you learned from it. The only catch in our case was our social studies teacher, he used to teach American government, at times was a candidate for mayor. So inevitably, some students would be working on his campaign, why not? And so that became a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
Forcing students to work on his campaign.
Yeah, that's funny.
Media. But that is a big thing now with high school, and it carries on to that.
So I think, again, and I'm just looking at it from my personal perspective, so I don't have a real, whatever I say about the status of like public interest, available public interest world, but I think, and when I was at Greenpeace, it was when it was like 2008 time, and so there was a lot of cuts with just people.
Yeah,
yeah. So.
Okay, so you get to law school, and some of the ways you've been involved with the community in law school were, let's talk about the Health Insurance Counselor Project. How did you get started with that? What is it? What does it do?
So that was me coming into second year, desperate to get out of the classroom because I had been out for 5 years, and this is a criticism from everyone, whether you've been out or not, is that it's a little bit out of touch, the sort of education that you're getting.
And the first year of law school is the most grinding?
Yeah, you have.
It's fair to say that's everywhere.
You're not even allowed. You have to sign something that says you won't work 20 hours, more than 20 hours, or outside of school in any capacity. So. Which
limits people from a certain economic background not being able to manage law school. I mean, in a sense.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's a lot there of opportunities there, though. I mean, loans are pretty heartily given out. But yeah, so I was really desperate to like get back and to have contact with people and feel like I was doing something worthwhile.
Not that your classmates and the professors aren't people.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, right?
Yeah. But there's not an interaction, You're learning a lot, and it's really important actually to be, seconded to the classroom at first. So I really wanted to do something, and the Health Insurance Counseling Project was something that was, available, and what appealed to me was the need to really work with the community, because there's a lot of pro bono work that is just, paperwork, which needs done, but you don't get that client experience. So we were trained in client counseling, and then also we were able to go out into the community, even to like senior housing communities, and come to them. Mm-hmm. But also a lot of the services were even phone-based. So it was low-income people, usually over 55, some other low-income people, but it was low-income people in DC or in Maryland even. We were available to them.
Did you find it easy to establish trust, or were you partnering at all with maybe a faith-based organization or some other community group that maybe they knew already?
Yeah.
Or how are you making a contact?
So the project is actually a part of the law school project, but also a project on the DC Office on Aging. So people were referred there, but it was really referred word of mouth or by these visits. So the director would go and give a presentation and really go out into the community, to senior centers, to senior housing facilities, and give them an overview, what you need to know about Medicare. Right. And of course, you follow up. So I think it was a great population to work with. Right. I think as far as being open, and we were talking about inspiring people, and people dealing with a lot of complex issues. Your problem isn't just that you can't pick a Medicare plan; it's that you can't pay for it, or that you're having health care problems, but you're also having a housing issue. Right. So that was. Basically you became really personally involved. So in these people's intimate details about their problems, their diseases, sometimes, ones that you know, they may be more private about other people in the community finding out about, for instance.
Right. So you had to have that level of trust.
I think so,
when
and
talking
doing
about
it by
them,
phone was a really,
yeah.
really, I don't know, it was hard to do, but if you're open, I think people pick up on that, and if you
Yeah.
actually listen.
Right. But there's a certain amount of, particularly people that are elderly in our society, particularly with internet scamming and different financial things, people have a right to be cautious on the phone and giving information.
Yeah, I
You
think
have to have
that
a way to get over that.
that does happen, especially when people would be. So sometimes people would call you and ask you to call their sister.
Okay.
So it's also that. It's like, how far do you reach, you know, across to get somebody to convince them to let you help them.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that is a challenge. I mean, the people that are able to take advantage of services are already sort of, you know, able to do things at a level that maybe the people most in need can't.
Right.
And that's, you know, and I'm sure an issue with anybody who works in direct services.
And were you finding that a lot of the law students there were doing this? Was it easy for you as a law student to do? Did the law school sort of facilitate it?
So we were trained. It was very intense,
Yeah.
actually. And at one point, we were even videotaped in mock interviews. And a 15-minute mock interview, our teacher dissected with us for an hour, you know, about basically our ability to listen and to build trust and to convey information and ask the right questions. So I think we felt kind of prepared. But
Okay.
I think the people that were attracted to that particular project, you know,
Yeah.
are might not be what people think of with your average law student. But there are a lot of students, even at GW, doing a lot of great community work.
Right. And was it a situation where you were working on a case for an extended period of time, or was it more of a short-term?
These were more
What was your
short-term
involvement? Okay.
interactions. So you had like a caseload, and I actually worked with them over the summer. So when students end the semester, people still have problems, or
Right.
they'll be in the middle of a case. So I worked to close about like 25 cases in
Okay.
2 months. So a lot of them, some of them were short-term, but some of them were, you know, even the next year or
Because
passed
you were looking for
on.
resolution of a case.
Yeah, transferred. Yeah.
Right.
So, but a lot of them were just, you know, giving people information, and some were, you know, appeals and things like that through the healthcare system.
So looking back on the different ways you've been engaged in the community, what do you think of as a big success?
Do you mean like as one of the projects I worked on? That?
Yeah, just something you've done in a project, or with Amnesty or Greenpeace, or what do you look back on and think, oh, this is a big success?
I think of the projects I've worked on, the ones that, you know, I think are extremely valuable, Amnesty International, particularly what their work with prisoners of conscience. So when people write letters through Amnesty, it literally protects people's safety by doing that. And the spotlight that it shines on certain individuals protects them. Right. And, you know, that's something that you can't always say with, you know, advocacy campaigns or issue-based campaigns. Right. Another one was the campaign for Jeanne Toru. It really brought the conversation about universal human rights in the courtroom. So through that campaign, the Greenpeace had an expert witness talk about this international covenant that Japan signed on to and ratified, and why why for this reason, you know, the defendants shouldn't be found guilty. So that was amazing. I mean, to be able to have this prolonged conversation with judges about international, basically freedom of expression, the international concept of it, and you know, and then the Health Rights Project is great. It's just giving people a way out of, you know, the box of medical bills, something that, you know, I don't think anybody could really deal with on their own. I think if I had that problem, I would call for help. So these are the things that have really, I think, been significant for me.
You've done a lot. You keep very busy. You're busy as a law student. So what do you think motivates you or inspires you to get out there and be the volunteer counselor and do the different types of things?
I think it's, looking at other people and not in maybe in a way that, is a little bit of a comparison. It's when you see people being, selfless, even if it's small things on a daily basis, you can really take stock in that and try to pass it along and see what happens. I think some of the other students, surprisingly, are inspiration to me as much as other ones, frustrate me. And
they know who they are.
Yeah. And I think, it's really amazing to find out what other people are doing with their time, It's amazing how much time people are giving. And I think that there's always an opportunity to give, even with your own talents, I don't know if filmmaking is necessarily my idea of, what I thought direct service could be, but
right.
If you actually do something in earnest, there's ways for you to use it to help other people.
But it does sound like you have a certain mockumentarian in you that has to come out again, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. But look, so what do you think is next? You're in your third year of law school, so job search?
Yeah, I would love, the ideal job is to do direct service work again, like the health insurance counseling project. Okay. I just think that the client interaction is that sort of fuel that you don't get, working in a big office or even working in Greenpeace in the headquarters, that contact with the community. And I would like to do pro bono hours on the side with artists in DC. Okay. We had help through Washington Area Lawyers for the Arts, and it was really great. And it was attorneys at big firms that spent their time, non-billable hours, helping us. And I just think it would be a great way to, help people and stay in touch with something that also fuels me, gives something back to me in working with film. Yeah,
we should definitely give them a plug because that's a great organization in Washington.
They're great.
Yeah. We'll show the website.
So yeah, I would like to do that and then also try to do that on the side.
So you plan to keep busy?
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. All right, well, Allison, I want to thank you for coming on the program. I also want to thank our volunteer crew here at Arlington Independent Media. They've been terrific. We've had David Cervantes on camera. We've had Hilary Freer and Steve Cordle in the booth. But most of all, I do want to thank Allison Kole for working so hard to make her communities and standing up for second graders a better place to live.
Thanks.
Thank you.